This video comes in response to Lawrie Rose's video on World Mental Health Day a couple of weeks ago, and in response to Men's Awareness Day. So trigger warning, if you're hoping for something more light-hearted with the usual sort of editing, then I'm afraid this video really isn't for you. Initially I wasn't going to do it because I just didn't have the energy to get things off my chest. There have been times when I've done so before, and in some cases it's backfired. But given how this is still a major problem for millions of people around the world, and how, for some reason, volunteers at railways have opened up to me in particular about their issues in preservation, it would be unkind and unlike me if I didn't at least try to advocate other people's mental health. Please keep in mind, I'm not doing this to try and seek pity or sympathy or anything like that, but if even one person sees this and feels reassured that they're not alone, or that they don't have to suffer in silence or live in fear of being bullied for opening up about their troubles, then this video would have been worth it as far as I'm concerned. There have been some real public dramas in the heritage railway scene in 2023, which I could have talked about and probably got some important discourse going, but some of them have already been given enough coverage in the press with what information has already been made available, which I've come to learn is never absolutely all of it. Aside from that, some conversations are simply too nuanced and complicated to have online without information being lost or taken out of context. I won't name any names or places when I talk about the following incidents because I don't mean to start any kind of hate campaigns against anybody. But from my experience, even before everything was online, heritage railways can be as rewarding as they can be exhausting and frustrating places to work. The long hours and high levels of teamwork that are needed to run a railway safely and manage to make money from it are only getting tougher to deal with. So when volunteers are put down after putting themselves forward, or in some cases put down and even dismissed after they've put in a complaint for being mistreated, it can make for some depressing vibes. I'll give you an example of a story I had from a friend of mine at his regular line for the past few years. He works part-time and can only get so many free weekends a year. After some personal complications with his own life, he turned up to work at the railway, only to be greeted by the railway's owner, who didn't say hello or how are you doing in the normal fashion, but opened the conversation with, "Oh, nice of you to show up then." Like, you can understand that sort of thing being said in a jokey or playful manner, but my friend's response to that was, if he was going to be spoken to like that, then why even bother giving up your free time for what's basically someone else's passion project? Another friend of mine who volunteers at least 3 railways has recently been feeling left out at one of them, who have told him they have no interest in passing him out for driving on account of his disability, or so he's been led to believe. He's proven competent on the footplate elsewhere, which you need to do physically and mentally, but being made to feel as though you can't when you've proven you can is pretty demoralizing. And that's before we get onto places that seem friendly and opening on first impressions, but then get cold feet and close you off as soon as they learn that you're autistic, or gay, or have some form of physical inconvenience like dyslexia or dyspraxia. One thing I've heard in passing was a much older volunteer who said in conversation, "We never had this LGB whatever rubbish in my day, and we never had all this mental stuff either." Which of course they would have done, but it wasn't as publicly acceptable as it is now. Need anyone be reminded that Alan Turing, who was one of the most prominent figureheads in the form of modern computing, was gay. It harked back to a time about 20 years ago when someone of my age at the very same railway said to me, "I'm not surprised people with autism used to get locked up. I am surprised they stopped doing it," which put me off volunteering anywhere for the best part of a decade. I recently started volunteering again at one of my local railways, this time Amberley Chalk Pits Museum, who have been extremely patient and accommodating about my efforts. I've only done one turn as of this video, and I'd like to do more, but my availability simply isn't that high. On top of that, my energy levels have been drained by my need to keep working. There have been months where I've tried to put out a video a week, but it's just led to burnout. I've wanted to take a good month or so off from making anything for my channel, but the reality is that's just not acceptable. The algorithm favours channels that are constantly active, putting things up at least once a month or every week or every couple of days. I'm envious of people like Lawrie or Jago Hazard who manage to put a new video up every couple of days or so, but I'm also in complete sympathy of them, because recording hours of fresh footage all over the country is no mean feat. It can be grueling, tiresome, and if you haven't got all the shots you need, or if something goes wrong and you need to go back and reshoot everything, it can make your anxiety go haywire. YouTubers and other form of freelancers don't get sick pay or paid holidays. We can only take time out when we can afford to do so. Not helped when some people's response to you is, "If you need to earn more money, just work harder." Which not only has been the attitude that those in power have held towards the rail industry in recent years, but was told to me soon after I had my operation and was still recovering. Train of Thought manages to upload a video a week and stream nearly every week, which is actually really commendable when you have to think about it. To research and write something, find enough assets of a reasonable quality, and edit something that you're happy putting out there every week is something which even most of the biggest names out there like Edache or History Buffs can't achieve. Now, having said that, someone like Train of Thought relies almost entirely on stock images and copyrighted material, which isn't a criticism, because that sort of thing is absolutely fine provided it's all been legitimately obtained and falls under fair use. And while I could do that for all of my videos, aside from the usual issues, like some angles and shots simply don't exist in archive form, or some pieces have to be obtained with permission or a license, all footage and photographs need to have been made in the first place, and heritage railways everywhere need the world to see what they're doing now, not what's been recorded by someone else 20 or 30 years ago. They're always going to need more volunteers and staff, more passengers and fresh faces interested in them so they can keep on running and keep railway heritage alive. Completely recycling archive footage from Railway Roundabout and other old programs is not only pushing the limits of fair use to the point where you're just completely replaying someone else's film without permission, which can land you into a great deal of trouble if you're not careful, but it's also extremely limiting. If there's a specific close-up or framing that you've got in mind, then there are sometimes just no options but to shoot it yourself. There are so many nuances to it, but the downside is the anxious perfectionist within me is constantly battling with the side that tells me, "You've got to put food on the table tonight, your rent and phone bill are due next week, oh and by the way, your car needs a service in 200 miles. So anyone who says that my well-being should always come first, or that you don't mind waiting for videos to be finished, it's very kind and patient of you to think of me. But equally, no bills are going to wait for me or allow me to rest. So even though I had a tumour in my back earlier this year, I just had to keep plodding on. There used to be a time when I tried to take a day off a week and just do nothing. No reading or writing, no editing, nothing. But so often, something came up on said rest day, be it an extras job on a film or a TV show that was calling, or an engine that was travelling on the right stock in the right place, or I needed to travel to reach a place where I was going to film the next day. So I didn't have much choice but to kick the habit of rest days and just keep working where I could. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, but with the cost of living going up, there's only so much rest time you can afford to take before you need to produce something that's going to pay your bills for the month. I can't speak for the costs of Jago and Lawrie, but when I started filming slips way back in 2010, a full tank of fuel for my car was about £58. Now that's gone up to anything between £85 and £95. And there are still some days where I have to choose fuel over food because margins remain that tight. So what's the upshot of all the pressure and strain? Well, this year, for the first time in over 6 years, I nearly ended everything. Twice. In the same morning. You'd think after Robin Williams committed suicide in 2014 that people would be a bit more open-minded and accepting of men's mental health in society, but there's still tons of work to do. By everybody. Awareness days are a good start, but it should extend to so much more than just another corporate tick box or anniversary of a celebrity's passing. Destigmatizing anyone who comes out and shares their problems can help save lives, not just those who are open about their struggles, but those who want to be open but feel they can't because they fear of being victimized for it too. Well, let me tell you, all of you, if you're suffering in silence or being scrutinized for your troubles, nobody has the right to make you feel bad for having some form of depression, anxiety, physical or learning inconvenience. That sort of thing doesn't reflect on the sort of person you are or what you're capable of doing. One of the most incredible people I met during my time in America was a driver at the Mount Washington Cog Railroad named Joe Eggleston, affectionately known as Eggy by all his friends and colleagues. He was one of the most friendly, approachable, and knowledgeable people I met there. Eggy was always smiling, always happy to see you, and what he didn't know about the Cog steam engines didn't seem worth knowing. I quickly learned that he'd suffered from hearing loss as a child and had to learn to read people's lips and feel the vibrations of machines in order to learn how to operate them. He grew up in a time that was less conscientious of disabilities and mental health awareness than we are now, yet he managed to achieve his lifelong dream of driving steam engines, and did so for over 25 years. The only reason he stopped was that he was tragically killed in a hiking accident at the end of 2022. So if anyone puts you down for something you're struggling with, people like Eggy prove that you can still have a form of disability and still go on to do great things as a good person. So if you feel anxious or depressed about anything, do please try to reach out and speak to someone for help. I'll leave helplines and web links in the description for anyone who's struggling. Stigmatism remains ongoing, but if enough people work at it, it can and needs to be broken. I'm Chris, and having gotten some of these things off my chest, I hope some of you can feel a little more compelled to be open about your inner demons, or seek help, or somehow, some way, look after your well-being a little bit more. Thanks for watching, and don't ever stop being awesome.